What I did this morning, I walked fast around the lake just to get some fresh air in my head. Yesterday, I made a prediction and it was wrong. So I'm glad that I made a prediction and not a statement. I said, it's a nice coincidence that we discuss finance on the day where it's predicted that it will be the only day that we have sunshine, because only the sun rises for free. But here we are. One of the things that I found interesting today, or yesterday, and which I think is helpful, that there are a lot of presentations, there's a lot of information, like how do you kind of make sense of this? And then you notice that through these presentations, there are a number of things which I would call in-your-face facts. And I listed some of the in-your-face facts for myself to sort of, get a grip on things. And so here are a few. 70% of the poor are not in the low-income countries. Now, it makes you think differently. Now, an authority spends more on prisons than on schools. The poorer you are, the less is spent per pupil. Aid can pay up to 50% of teachers' salaries. Per one financial unit that comes from aid, 1.5 comes from remittance, 6.5 from South-South trade. For achieving literacy for everyone, you cut costs by finding another solution. In countries, some weakest regions refuse aid because the conditions, that are set cannot be met because these are the weakest regions. So, and I think, there are like 5, 10 more, or there are ones, that you notice yourself. And to me, that is, in terms to make sense of, to get a sort of inspired, I think, we should look for these in-your-face facts, to make the next step. I borrowed another term from finance, where helpfully finance was at the beginning defined as getting the money, being accountable, controlling your costs. That is what we are talking about. And another term is you have to get the balance right. Okay, when you are financially reporting, for sure you have to do that. But I think also we have to get the balance right, but each one in their individual situation has the balance right. If you looked at financing, you saw that there were quite a number of things that we had in common, but in a different mix. If you look at finance, sometimes, it is from federal governments, from local governments, civic society pressure, legal action, community contribution, private funding, and or aid. But the mixing is different. We saw examples from countries where local funding is cut and they look to the central government for help. And on the other hand, central government is cutting the funds, and there's this belief that local governments will take action. So, to me it is that in itself, the elements for financing, for sort of traditional financing, we have in common. And you can sort of make an analysis where the weakest parts are and where you want to reinforce. For me interesting was that, in some countries legal action is a sort of standard tool of getting more funds available. Where in other countries it might be a final or a last resort. Then, this is not the only thing you can do. One of the things that, first, I want to mention one example, that came out. I mean, the example of China that was given, where in terms of financing and planning, for change in education, it showed it's a long-term process. It was 10, 15, 20 years. We all look for these quick things to happen. We are impatient, but things takes time. The interesting thing there was per period, to me, you know, like choices were made. You know, some things went very well, something went wrong, and people were willing to admit, you know, like that things need to be different. You know, so it's like looking for the perfect solution that will work always. It's a sort of holy grail search, I guess. But, you know, if you don't do that, there's still ways of moving ahead, you know, by having, again, you know, this balance of government evaluation, you know, pressure from public or from civic society, you know, from experts to make the next step. Now, it's interesting to note that in some countries, you know, like the state or the government is seen as the driver of change or helping move along, and some almost like the absolute enemy. You know, like, and again there, you know, like I guess we can learn from one another. Overall, you know, like these traditional balance of finances probably will not get us there. So a number of ideas were given for other ways of financing, you know, like educational change. However, in order to make that happen, you know, like it was quite strongly put forward that we have to get our act together. You know, education is not high on the agenda. We can say, you know, like it's their fault, you know, but I think we also have to look at ourselves. What are we doing to put education on the agenda? Now, what are we doing to, you know, as we saw in examples in the day before, to the fact that, like, if we link up with health, if we link up with the community, to make that transparent, that really people can see, you know, like we can finance not an individual activity within education, but serving a community of which education is an essential part. Then finally, again, I had this idea when we, or most of us, were in Salzburg yesterday afternoon, and I will read it out. To finish on a cultural metaphor, during the late afternoon visit to the Mozart house in Salzburg, a small performance was given on the original pianoforte on which Mozart had played. The keyboard was smaller. The white and black keys were reversed. Why? Because at that time, ebony wood was much cheaper than ivory. You know, like the pedals, instead of with your foot, you had to use your knees. However, the music was still beautiful. Thank you very much.